And we're live.
All right. I can still hear the music in the background, so I'm sure the audience
Yeah,
can too. All right.
it just us.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We got things are a little bit shooken up tonight. Ben's outside. We didn't have our show last week because Ben was exploring the Great White North. But it is what it is. How is everybody? How was your trip, Ben?
Alaska was amazing. Little weird though. Everything's expensive up there if you want to go. And somebody give us some feedback. You're frozen on my screen, so I hope you're not frozen for everybody.
I am.
Yeah,
Oh well, I'm
we'll
sure
wait and
it'll
see.
catch up. I'm sure it'll
But
catch.
I don't have any idea what's going on. Like I said, I've been on vacation, so I wasn't following news. But you will enlighten me, and Simon will, along with the viewers, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So first things first is the DNC is going on, and it has been as big of a shit show as the party itself is. Couple of nights ago, they had Joe Biden as sort of the speaker to cap everything off for the night. He didn't get on stage until after 11:30, which is well past Joe Biden's
Way
bedtime.
past Joey's bedtime.
Way past his bedtime, and he's stumbled and bumbled and got mad and yelled and did his normal telling things that have already been debunked and tried to get everybody riled up because apparently if it looks like Trump's going to win, it's definitely going to be race riot season again. And so a lot of people on the right were suspecting that was kind of a slight to him, like get him up there really late, let him make a fool of himself as one last send off. And then the next night, it was Barack Obama's turn to be the kind of keynote speaker for the end of the night. And again, he was up there after 11 o'clock. It was like their scheduling is off. They cheer for everything. Their applause lines are way too long. The thing drags on. They let a whole bunch of nobodies speak for way too long. And then when they finally get to their keynote speaker, it's like 11 o'clock at night and everybody's falling asleep. Bill Clinton was last night. And again, super late and mumble bumble just wasn't Bill Clinton's a decent public speaker for all of his faults. He does have stage presence, but he did not last night. And I think Kamala Harris is supposed to be the keynote speaker tonight. We'll see how it goes. As far as I know, things are still going on, maybe. But one of the things that was kind of funny was that there was supposed to be like a breakfast buffet for delegates at the hotel this morning. And some silly, okay. So the FBI is investigating this as some type of like vandalism or pranks or whatever. But apparently somebody put a bunch of maggots, like live maggots, into the food. And the FBI is investigating, of course. But I say it was just a catering mix-up. And that was supposed to be the breakfast buffet for the lizard overlords, and things just kind of got stuck.
Danishes. We want maggots.
Exactly. So catering mix-ups and scheduling conflicts, and when Barack and Michelle Obama were there speaking, Kamala Harris wasn't even in the same state. She was out of state doing a rally in Wisconsin. And I mean, everything is just bumblefucked, tore up from the floor up. And yeah, it's wonderful. You've got.
When I see the news, they're supposed to be like Beyonce or Taylor Swift tonight, or is that tomorrow?
I'm not sure who. They've had Little John. They've had all these performers and influencers get up there because that's the only thing that'll draw a crowd. We've seen that from several of Kamala's rallies where she's had big name performers come. People show up, get a free concert, and then just like start filing out the door before she even takes the stage to start cackling or whatever.
They haven't talked about any policy or nothing, have they? It seems like it's just been Orange Man bad.
Yeah, it's pretty much been 2 minutes hate. And they got this bizarre schizophrenic approach to their messaging because they're it seems like they're trying to bring back the Obama hope and change message, but that's not going to work because change from them, they're the ones that are in office right now. If you're talking about change, you're talking about changing from yourself. And if you double down on the policies that you've had over the last 4 years, then you're doubling down on failure because everybody can see how awful things are. Some of the other things is there's a lot of protesters outside because of the Palestine and Israel thing. And again, in the schizophrenic messaging department, you've got people protesting on behalf of Palestine, talking about how many kids did you kill today? It was like, hey, hey, what do you say? How many kids did you kill today? That's their little chant that they're doing. And then one block down the street, you've got Planned Parenthood setting up a mobile clinic to offer free vasectomies and abortions on site. So it's like, how many kids did you kill today? Well, let's just take a stroll down to Planned Parenthood and get the official numbers. And a lot of people have noted that getting a vasectomy at the DNC is about as on the nose as it gets. In fact, Freedom Tunes did a very wonderful cartoon about it today, where they've got like a guy with the peanuts in the stands at a baseball game.
Yeah, I should have threw that in the pre-show.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. He's like, vasectomies, vasectomies, and everybody's like, oh, mine stopped working on their own. Oh, I left those in my wife's purse. Oh, I had mine cut off 3 days ago. I'm transitioning.
I did see the interview that they did with some, liberal cuck who was talking about how he was excited for minorities and his wife's boyfriend's a minority. And did you see that?
That was a troll. That was a guy named.
It was so hard to tell, though.
Exactly. I mean, that's what makes it so good. That was a guy named Alex Stringer, and he was actually on InfoWars today talking about that because he did it with the BBC, and he's talking about how they're in a polyamorous relationship, and his wife's boyfriend's black. Oh, I've learned so much about minorities, and it's like,
I was like, this has to be a troll, but it could literally be your standard white liberal male.
It was right up there to the line of Poe's Law, and it was perfectly executed. Speaking of trolls at the DNC, there are a few right-wing influencers there who are incognito. You got James O'Keefe wearing a COVID mask and walking around. I don't think anybody's found him yet. Matt Walsh keeps popping up anytime the cameras are like focusing on a big-name DNC guy. He's like standing in the background with a confused.
Why do they have to be incognito though? Were they banned from the facility, or they're just? I don't understand.
I don't know. Maybe if they get their trolling out there, they'll get caught and thrown out by security or whatever. But you have James.
It's like every left-wing media outlet was allowed at the RNC convention, so they got to sneak in.
Yeah. So you got James O'Keefe and Matt Walsh. You got that Alex Stringer guy that I was just talking about, and then Mike Lindell, the My Pillow guy, shaved his mustache. The first time that he shaved his mustache in like 15 or 20 years.
That looked terrible.
Shaved his mustache, put on a pair of aviators and a ball cap, and he's walking around there at the DNC. So pretty good. Having a good old time there at the Windy City. But yeah. So there's enough about that. I sent you a link to an article, and we'll get Simon in here to give his 2 cents on it, because he sent us something in the host chat, and it's actually kind of appropriate because with what he sent and what I sent you all have to do with nuclear stuff. So let's just go over what I sent you real quick, and we'll get Simon's take on it.
Is that the Paul Hookham one? Which one was that?
The queering of the nuclear arsenal.
Oh, right. Just lead up to it, and I'll try and let me grab it here.
Yeah, it's oh shit, I didn't put it in our group chat.
We'll get to it, but go ahead.
Okay, so apparently,
I'll get it moved over.
Apparently, this person who is a there it is right there. It's called Queer Theory. Biden-Harris official calls for queering the nuclear weapons. So it's going into how this person whose name is Sneha Nair. I probably butchered that, but I don't care because this person is a lunatic. So they're talking about applying queer theory to America's nuclear triad and how. Well, I'll just read this.
She wrote a paper titled "Queering Nuclear Weapons: How LGBTQ Inclusion Strengthens Security and Reshapes Disarmament."
Yes, exactly. Because if there's anything that the United States needs right now, with everything going on in Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Taiwan, and China, is disarmament. So, anyways, this little blurb here from it says queer theory informs the struggle for nuclear justice and disarmament. Queer theory helps to shift the perception of nuclear weapons as instruments for security by telling the hidden stories of displacement,
All right,
illness, and trauma caused by their
can
production
I
and
stop you
testing.
for a second though?
Yeah.
You know my theory about looking for the tiny hats? Her co-author, Louis Reitman,
Mm.
a Yiddish surname. Didn't have to look far to find it on that one.
Check the tiny hats. But with a name like Sneha Nair, that sounds very Persian to me. So maybe this is some reaching across the sectarian aisle there. Where, anyways, but it says by understanding DEI as a set of values critical to security and therefore as an element of an effective nuclear security culture, stakeholders can explore how DEI can contribute to stronger security at nuclear facilities. So while universities and Fortune 500 companies and sports teams and everything is deciding to finally kick DEI to the curb, this person is deciding that it's a good idea to promote DEI for national security and nuclear weapons. I mean, it's like you're a little bit behind the curve there, sweetheart.
The queer lens prioritizes the rights and well-beings of people over the idea of national security.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. Was that a train? Is that a train for you, Ben?
No, I live in an area where they're not supposed to blow the horns, but apparently somebody's feeling horny.
I guess so. Honk if you're horny. Anyway, so why don't we little Simon weigh in there on queering the nuclear triad? What do you have to say about that, Simon?
So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to come on with you guys, just in case I happen to die in my sleep, given what I've just found about 30 minutes ago. So the Chinese premier flew to Moscow and met with both Putin and the Russian prime minister. And they signed a shitload of documents together, one of which is very important in the context of co-developing the Arctic region and cooperating on the Northern Sea Route. So that on its own is a very, very important story, but was relayed in a couple of Chinese newspapers today. That wasn't like a big secret, okay? But exactly in the context of what you've been talking about, we have two things. So we have the story in the New York Times that Biden told the Department of Defense, supposedly in March of this year, that they had to prepare for a three-front simultaneous nuclear war with Russia, China, and North Korea. Now, that may have seemed a little far-fetched, but that was what was relayed in the New York Times yesterday. Okay, so the premier, Chinese premier, and the Russian prime minister, they had a big sit down with a shitload of other ministers and department directors, kind of like the equivalent of the senior executive service in the United States. And in addition to all the specific documents they signed a general communique on the 29th China-Russia heads of government meeting. So even while COVID occurred, they were still doing this, albeit then using Zoom or their equivalent. Okay, so this generated a 31-page document that's just been published on a Russian government website, and it talks about their speeches, and it talks about all the documents that have been signed, and then it says there's a link to a PDF. Okay, but the hyperlink doesn't work. But if you actually click on the picture of the PDF, literally like a pile of paper, then that takes you to this like HTML plain text, no chapter headings, page numbers, thank God, but otherwise really innocuous 31-page document. Okay, no translate function, real painful to do in photographs page by page, but if you drop it into Zandex, it gives you like a rough translation. So to my absolute amazement, at the bottom of page 17, for any person who's particularly insane and wants to read some out of syntax Russian at midnight on a Thursday, it actually says, and I'm just going to read you this paragraph because this is real big breaking news. Okay, probably be on InfoWars tomorrow of this, and then in the evening I'll be on weaponizednews.com. But you guys are getting this first, just in case I disappear. Okay, so the link for this is http://government.ru/news/52427/. Okay, so that's where people can find the transcript of the meeting, and then they go down 3/4 of the way down the page, and it says PDF and the title of the document. Clicking on the title doesn't work, but clicking on the document does. It then takes you to a page in Russian. You have to open up Yandex Russian English translation, copy and paste the link to the document, drop it in, and it translates all 31 pages in one go. Okay. But on the bottom of page 17, rolling over onto page 18, this is incredible. This is the biggest breaking news that I've given you guys ever. Okay. And there's been a few good stories. So it says, this direct quotation from the document, translated from Russian into English, it says, to deepen the partnership in the field of peaceful nuclear energy based on the experience of successful implementation of the Tianwan nuclear power plant and the Zudapu nuclear power projects, and to intensify cooperation in the field of nuclear, thermonuclear weapons, nuclear fusion, fast neutron reactors, and the closed nuclear fuel cell, develop comprehensive cooperation based upon the principles of mutual benefit and balance of interest in the form of package agreements in the field of initial stages of the nuclear fuel cycle and joint construction of nuclear power plants. But the key sentence there, it's not even a sentence, it's a phrase. And note the word, and to intensify cooperation in the field of thermonuclear weapons. And intensify would indicate that this is already underway. It's not start, it's not begin, it's intensify.
Right. Yeah, so like I know I was kind of making light of what I was talking about with the applying DEI and queer theory to our nuclear arsenal. So this thing that you're talking about, did that just came out today?
Yes,
Okay.
literally like hours ago, the PDF with the full text of the 31-page China-Russia agreement has been published. And I went through this with a Russian guy. He's like, you're probably the only person to have read this document, is what his response to me. And it, like, I've read this in RT and Sputnik and on Xinhua and Global Times, and they're talking about various aspects of the agreement, and nobody has mentioned this incredible sentence, which once again is, and to intensify cooperation in the field of thermonuclear weapons. Now, it's possible that they have scanned the classified version of this document, and this was never intended to be published.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right.
you think about it, START is going to end soon, right? START 2 ends.
Yeah.
And the State Department have been publicly saying, we want to start negotiating START 3. And the Russians are like, drop dead, you've got to be kidding after you did us over on Minsk 2. There's no way, as you're invading like Russia with NATO forces into Kursk Oblast, that we're going to be talking about nuclear disarmament with you or joint missile silo visits or anything of that nature, right? So we know that the Chinese are massively expanding their nuclear arsenal. I mean, they're in a real rush to, be ready for World War III. And the fact that there could be a massive amount of technology transfer from the Russians to the Chinese in return for God knows what. It's the second that START 2 ends, which I believe is like the first quarter of 2026. So literally like less than 2 years away. This agreement that they've just signed today between the Premier of China and the Prime Minister of Russia is a huge deal. I mean, like, this is huge breaking news that we're discussing here. And it's literally half of a sentence in the bottom line of page 17 of a 31-page document.
Right. You bring up the significance of saying things, wording it like intensify the cooperation. So how long do you think that they've been either cooperating or at least setting the table for when these START treaties end to be like, okay, now these is over and go and shove whatever you've got across the table. And
I mean, who knows if they're even waiting, right? I mean,
yeah,
China's not a party to START 2. So START is
right,
the strategic treaty on arms reduction, right?
right.
And that was negotiated a long time ago. All of these things have sunset provisions in them. It's naturally, it's not like Trump pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal where he just cancelled it. Here, it like naturally ends, but it was always intended that version 3 would be negotiated before version 2 expired. Okay, but obviously nobody anticipated Ukraine kicking off like 10 years ago. So who's to tell what technology is being transferred and in terms of hypersonics or targeting or the Russians have obviously built.
Well, everything they're learning in Ukraine, fighting Western.
Well, no, this is much more. I mean, when they're talking about
equipment.
thermonuclear weapons, this is kind of ICBM type stuff. So the Russians
Right.
are just deploying what is called their RSS-28, which the NATO name for that is Satan 2, and Putin calls it Sarmat, which is the first name of Sarmat Chowdhury, who wrote the second sequel to Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book, and it's called The Urban Jungle Book. And Putin loves the Jungle Book, and he has said that his famous English language author was Rudyard Kipling. Okay, he's really obsessed with that. So he's been naming Russian missile systems after characters out of Rudyard Kipling's stories from like 1890 to 1910. It all seems a bit obscure, but that's what's been happening going back to like, I don't know, 2014 or something. And there's only like one or two exceptions.
That's a bizarre trivia question.
Poseidon, Panther, Sarmat, they're all linked in some way or other to Rudyard Kipling. Okay. I once did a 35-minute talk about this on one of Hal Turner's radio shows, and he was furious, but he was so intrigued that he didn't interrupt me. It did like a 35-minute monologue. But I had done weeks researching all kinds of Russian weapon systems, and then going through the entire written catalogue of Rudyard Kipling's work, and I found like 39 examples of missile systems being named after Rudyard Kipling characters. 39.
So I'm willing to bet in that paper there weren't any sections about the effects these nuclear systems will have on queer people.
No, and I would suggest, because their arse is hanging out, that they'll be particularly vulnerable.
Yeah, so as much as like I said, I was making light and fun of what our nuclear people are up to. This Russia-China cooperation PDF came out today. The stupid queering of the nuclear arsenal came out. I don't know when it came out. It came out a few days ago, I think. Yeah. So,
but your point is exceptionally well made, because we're told we're about to go into a 3-front simultaneous nuclear war, right? That's a presidential directive that's been given to the U.S. Department of Defense. Don't assume we're going to have a limited exchange with North Korea or China or Russia. It's all in, all three, all at once. Okay?
Right.
So then we find out that the Russians, for God knows how long, have been working on thermonuclear weapon development with the Chinese. Okay? And yet our apparently most immediate response in recent weeks has been these two minority folks telling us that we all need to be like super gay in the bunker, because rather than repopulating the earth, we should be having kind of same-sex much as possible.
How much of this might be like a kayfabe? I mean, it's like, well, let's I don't know how much I want to say. I mean, I live in the middle of the nuclear field, so I see what's going on. How much of this could be just pretending we
being
give a
hoisted
shit?
over the minimum 2 silos?
What's that?
I said, have you seen any rainbow flags being hoisted over the Minuteman II silos?
No, and I won't go into I mean, we could go into details after we stop, but
okay.
I would almost say that this might be a case of let the kids have their win and think that we're queering up the nuclear arsenal.
Yeah,
and,
that's what I was.
Let's put that image out to the rest of the world that
But
we're cutting everything back.
I'm not trying to suggest that we have definitively been crippled by subversives within the government, but we probably have been crippled by subversives within the government. And even when you think that the Air Force is full of sound thinking people, you then realize who the current Joint Chief of Staff is, General Brown. And then you realize that all your hopes and aspirations as to our surviving national security were probably shot about 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I'm reading through this article again while you guys are talking, and this Sneha Nair is appointed in February as the special assistant at the National Nuclear Security Administration, a wing of the Biden-Harris Department of Energy. And that was Ben hit the point that I was trying to make. It's like, I don't want to give these guys too much credit or make it seem like they're playing like some type of a 4D chess, but maybe it's like putting this out there, like he said, was just something to keep the activists satiated while the adults are in the back doing real work.
Even if we utterly discard it and to say that story never existed, right? Which I'm, willing to do. That paragraph that I've just read to you from that document that literally just came out hours ago is still incredibly significant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's almost too much for words, and it really does require.
And exactly as you picked up, to your credit, the key phrase other than thermonuclear is intensify, because that unequivocally indicates that this is not a beginning.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. It really just goes. It begs the question of how long have they been intensifying, and to what extent, and what knowledge is being traded, and in exchange for what type of material goods? Because we know that Russia has a shitload of ICBMs, and whether or not they're in decent repair or not is anybody's guess. We know that China has a massive workforce as well as a exploding tech sector, which could be, the cooperation between those two. You could have all of Russia's fissile material combined with a burgeoning tech sector that could modernize the
Willing to
delivery
disregard
systems.
all environmental,
Yeah.
their entire environment.
Well,
They'll
and they're talking about the successful implementation of 2 other nuclear power projects. So one
Hmm.
has to ask yourself, is the plutonium being generated by those nuclear power projects being transferred to the Chinese for production of more nuclear weapons? And whilst Russia is hard limited at 5,500 warheads, are they giving the Chinese the technology and the fissile materials to build an extra 2 or 3,000 themselves? That if they really have this strong of an alliance, which is far beyond anything that any Western analyst has ever suggested, this is a total game changer. Okay. And the complaints that Blinken has been making once again this week, that boo hoo, despite the fact that we're giving, the Ukrainians hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment, that they've now driven into Russia directly with a shitload of British, American, and Polish mercenaries. It turns
I saw
out
that story.
that the Russian and Chinese are working on freaking next generation nukes. So the idea that China's only giving Russia machine tools and
Yeah.
dies and parts to refurbish their tank factories is probably a long, long way from the truth. And this other idea that the Russians are like total vassals, they can't trust the Chinese are going to eat the Russians at some point, they're going to march 100 million people into Siberia, etc., etc., etc. All of these stories that we've been told about how we don't have to be worried about the Russia-Chinese relationship because it's unsustainable. That one, what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-word phrase absolutely guts everything we've been told by Rand, Brookings, Hudson, United Services Institute, CNAS, Chatham House. All of these think tanks appear to have been totally wrong.
Yeah, this is one of those things that's like it's a shame that we're talking about it, because our audience isn't very big, and this is one of those things that is like a
Like I said,
legitimate world spanning oh shit type of
yeah,
thing that needs
just
more
in case
attention.
I die in my sleep, I'm pretty happy to have got it out with you guys, okay? Because I'm not going to be doing my show for like 20 hours. I'll try and get
Hmm.
on Harrison, but who knows if they'll even take calls, because they're going to be talking nonstop about Kamala for 3 hours, even when I'm kind of like running around naked with a placard board, warning about the end of the world.
Well, that's one way to get the message out, I guess.
Well, it
But
worked for Bruce Willis, right?
yeah, yes, it did. Yeah, oh man, I'm almost at a loss for words about just how significant something like this is. And I don't know if it's because I've got news burnout, or if it's just like so big that the horseshoe theory has come back around full circle, to where it's just like, okay, this is so big that I can't do anything about it. So why even bother? It's
Well,
uh,
I know, to be fair to you guys and me, there are a shitload of people being paid a shitload of money with a shitload of PhDs who haven't read this, haven't understood. Well, maybe they would understand its importance if they ever do read it. I don't even know how I'm gonna approach this in terms of my Twitter page and stuff tomorrow. I mean, I've been sending stuff to McGregor and Ritter, and Galloway does respond. Thomas Paine, Tucker, Rogan get no response whatsoever. Even Hervé Morage, whose show I've been on 14 times, apparently is happily stealing my material, but not giving me credit or even responding in a pleasant manner. So, I mean, there's a limited outreach that I have. So I understand exactly where you're coming from, but at the end of the day, this shows the value of citizen journalry.
Yeah, it does.
So, I mean, I'm a bit weird. I have these kind of intuitions, and I suddenly go into a frenzy about wanting to find a document. And I had help from somebody finding it, but he couldn't get it to open. And I got it to open, and then he couldn't. When I sent him the link for the open version, he couldn't get it translate. I translated, then he said I don't have time to read it, and I kind of plowed through the whole. I can speed read very fast and kind of plowed. There are other significant things in it, but nothing as significant as this. And I've seen classified documents before, and then I've seen redacted versions and sanitized versions. This really strikes me, and this is just a gut feel, that some bureaucrat, because it doesn't have even its own sentence, let alone its own paragraph, has maybe redacted sections or sanitized sections, and because it's like 10 words at the bottom of a page, they've just missed it, and they've published the PDF with this thing hanging out there. I can't prove that, but it's so extraordinary that that's the only explanation that I've got. Because if you wanted to send it as a signal to the Biden administration, it's too subtle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's
This
half of a sentence at the bottom of page 17 of a 31-page document in Russian, published at like midnight Moscow time. It's not like a flashing red light warning signal.
Right. That is a very good point. And the fact that this is, like you said, it was like a photograph of a page of paper that you had to like run through a translator and do all. It's way too subtle. This seems like an accident, not an accident, but like it's not something that people are supposed to see. This is like like an almost like an eyes only type of thing, or only the people that are supposed to read it would know where to go to see it, and so it's
And
just kind of
like I
there.
said, it's half of a sentence in the middle of a paragraph that overlaps 2 pages in a 31-page document.
Right.
There's no direct link to on either the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs or the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Russian or in Chinese.
Right. So I want to talk about another aspect of that paragraph that you sent. And that's the not the nuclear weapons, but the nuclear power.
Mm-hmm.
So in the copy pasted that you sent in our host chat over here, there's a 17. Are they building 17 nuclear reactors, or is that 17 just something?
That's page number 17.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
Because 17 is at the bottom corner of the page. When I cut and paste it picks up that, and then it goes on to page 18. So that's a perfectly valid question, but no, that actually basically is page 17.
Okay, but going back to the nuclear power aspect of it, they're going all in on nuclear power while we're fucking around with renewables.
Have announced this week the construction of 11 additional nuclear reactors split among 5 facilities with a construction time of 2 years.
Right. That right there by itself, I mean, you take the nuclear weapons completely off of the table. Nuclear power at that scale, while the West is dicking around with windmills and solar
Takes us
panels.
20 years to build a power plant.
Exactly. I mean, part of it's the environmental precautions and everything that has to go into these nuclear power plants, but still, at that scale, they're going to be eating our lunch because they'll just be able to do so much more. And when you tack on the fact that they want to have all of these electric vehicle mandates and everything that's going to be sucking off of our already overtaxed grid, we're not going to have the juice necessary to do the high tech things that we need to do in order to, be a forerunner on the world stage anymore. Whereas they are, we're going to build 11 nuclear power plants in 2 years, and they're probably going to do that and be able to do that, whereas we can't. It's
So
nuts.
the other really important, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So there's just two other little bits that I want to share about this document. So in the Global Times account of this document, they actually said that it was intended to go beyond the comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination in the new era, which is the absolute top of the 16 categories of Chinese diplomatic relations. And we've discussed that in the past. And they're literally, the Chinese newspapers are saying that we're going to invent a level 1+, and we're promoting our strategic partnership of coordination in the new era to like a super duper comprehensive strategic partnership of coordination. Okay, and already the word coordination was key, because that indicated that like all these people who were saying, yeah, like the Chinese said this and they've blindsided the Russians, or the Russians have done this, and I wonder if they had Xi's permission. No, it says partnership of coordination. So everything is being run past the other side before it gets published. Everything. Okay, so that's really important. And that's where we've been at until today. Now they're saying we're going beyond that. Okay, and that's in the Chinese mainstream media. Okay, now one of the other things that has been reported by CGTN of the Chinese is they say, quote, the communique pointed out that the efforts will be made to expand mutually beneficial cooperation in the Arctic, strengthen cooperation in shipping development, navigation safety, and polar ship technology, and note this, construction. Both countries will encourage their enterprises to actively engage in the Arctic shipping route, that's the NSR, Northern Sea Route, cooperation based on market principles, and pay special attention to the protection of the Arctic ecosystem. Now, the reason why this is critical is because America has 2 icebreakers total in the US Navy, right? They're both 40 years old, and one of them just had a massive engine fire and is being towed to port for repairs. Okay, the Canadians have like, I don't know, 2 or 3. They're also ancient, right? And the Russians are on a crash build program of 8 ultra heavy duty nuclear powered icebreakers, specifically to make the Northern Sea Route navigable year round, 12 months of the year, as opposed to like 4 months of the year because of the ice. Okay. Now, they want to run oil and LNG ships on that route but they have to be super reinforced hulls, even if they're just bouncing off bits after the nuclear icebreaker has cleared a path for them. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately for the Russians, their ship construction is facing exactly the same problems as American ship construction, particularly when they're specialized vessels. They have post-Cold War hugely wound down their facilities, and the average age of the trained guys is like 60 years old. And in Russia, all the young guys are being conscripted or paid big bonuses if they've got kind of engineering or Navy skills to sign service contracts, right? But that's not the case in China, nor is it the case in India. So the Russians have been talking about the Indian shipyards and the Russian shipyards, even though they don't normally make ice hardened cargo vessels.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, if we give you the plans and the technology, do you think you have the skills to do this and do it much faster than America or Russia could do? So you look at how the Chinese are putting out like a new naval vessel like every 2 weeks, and America's taking like 2 years to build these things, if we're lucky, and they don't catch fire halfway through, like the Bonhomme, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is the massive strategic shift. So not only are they talking about, it would appear, sharing nuclear technology, is they're sharing all of this ice breaking shipping technology as well. And then at a quarter or a fifth of the price, they're going to have these ships built in Russia and, sorry, not in Russia, in China and India. So in terms of America being massively behind the curve, you look at it's ironically, Ben, you having been to Alaska, you look from Seattle all the way round until Maine, right? With all those little gullies and curves and all the other places where past explorers have got locked in ice and died. That is a shitload of perimeter to defend. That's as higgledy-piggledy and in and out like the coastline of Norway.
Wow.
This is a big deal, guys. Really,
It is, yeah.
there. And it's not
So
just on the nukes. It's on the shipbuilding and the Northern Sea Route as well. Now, when I've raised this with a guy called Ed Finley, for example, or Serco Marciano, or G Captain, or Frank Stone, who are really interested in kind of the shipping and logistic routes, they're like, yeah, well, it's only navigable 4 months of the year, and yeah, there's no navigation buoys, and yeah, there's no SE rescue, and no, there's no pre-positioned supplies in case crews have to come ashore in their rescue craft or anything like that, right? All of that is in play. Like, they understand that. I've read the master's guide to navigating the Northern Sea Route, even though I'm not a regular seafarer, because I wanted to see how advanced that manual was. And it was available in Japanese, and I translated it into English. Okay. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of pages that are, to be agreed, to be fulfilled, project so and so, right? But that is clearly, to use a navigation term, full steam ahead at this point.
All right. So I want to kind of backtrack a little bit about these icebreakers and these Navy vessels that are being made in China and India. So you've brought up before, and you brought up tonight, that the United States, our abilities to make naval vessels is severely limited. We're cranking out one every couple of years if we're lucky.
Remember, we're
And
supposed to be making one nuclear submarine a year, and they're
right,
averaging two.
right.
2 years,
So
not 2 subs a year, 1 sub in 2 years. And that's why we've got this massive backlog.
You're right, yeah. And now you're saying that Russia is also in a lot of the same predicament, but they're going to be sort of offshoring their
Outsourcing
shipbuilding
it.
to
Yeah.
outsourcing it to China and India. So with Russia and the United States having very similar problems, but China and India not having these problems, is this a manpower thing? Is this uh,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
is it a
It it
port
it
facilities thing too?
it 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 largely seems to be a labor issue. So there's demand for running, if not 3 shifts a day, then 2 shifts a day,
Right,
and to construct naval nuclear powered vessels is so specialized, and you have to be so severely background checked to even gain the employment if you have the skills,
right.
that they just can't upscale, quadruple in anything less than 5 years.
Right. And so that kind of leads me on to the into the next question. Would these sort of mass produced naval vessels, especially of the nuclear type, if they can't be made at scale and on time in a place like Russia and United States because of those issues, will the ones that are being made in India and China be of a decent quality?
Well, this is the thing, that not only does there have to be a technology transfer, but there has to be either co-investment or at least co-staffing in order that you can have, senior union workers who will actually relocate for years at a time in order to not only transfer the technology but transfer the skills. So
Right. That's
the obvious place for the United States to outsource would be the Republic of Korea, because they make a lot of ships and they make them very fast, but they don't make nuclear powered ships.
mhm. Right, that there is such a thing as institutional knowledge. It's one thing to have a labor shortage, but if you don't have the institutional knowledge of what that labor is supposed to be applied to,
Yeah.
then you've just got a bunch of people banging hammers on.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
carriers.
it's you
Yeah.
need to have the people who know what they're doing in order to direct that labor, and that seems to be what they're doing. Is they're going to get like one Russian guy who knows how to build a nuclear reactor and 50 Indian guys who are going to put it together under his supervision.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I wouldn't want to
if you
trust my
look back
life to an
in
Indian
the history of
icebreaker.
the Russian Navy, say in the 1700s, they would bring in a British or a Dutch
Hmm.
master shipbuilder, and he'd be responsible for the construction of 10 man of war ships simultaneously.
Right. Wow, that's crazy.
But guys, hats off to Rose to Liberty. You're breaking the story, and ironically, you hadn't even put out a link for the show that I can see.
I put it out. It's on Twitter. It's on Facebook.
Really, because I went to your page because I wanted to share it and I couldn't see anything.
it was shared by Weaponized News.
Okay, then I need to relook, and I'll definitely put it out there. But yeah, so this is all the stuff that's going on, and this is being discussed in the Senate Armed Forces Committee. I mean, they've told them, shit, we need 10 nuclear powered icebreakers like in a year, but like we can't build them in America at any price. Like if we pay $10 billion each, we physically can't get them built.
Yeah, I think they're probably going to take second fiddle to the submarines at this point.
No,
They can barely
they've
get
got a
their
50%
submarines.
delay on the submarines. So yeah, it's a huge, huge problem, and one that, I mean, these kind of things should be part of the subject of the presidential campaign. Like, how much is it going to cost? What needs to be done, and how is it industrially possible given the limitations that we currently face? Can you farm it out to the French? Can you farm it out to the British? Can you farm it out to the Canadians? Can you farm it out to the Koreans? They've got to be friendly governments, right? Can the Japanese and the Koreans build half a ship each? Whatever. Like, how can we get this done? But when you look at how these nuclear ships are made, they don't build the ship, cut a hole and then lower the nuclear power plant into it. It tends to be built around the nuclear power plant to start with.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's a big technological impediment to just really outsourcing it. And then security is or industrial espionage is a big problem, because if you've outsourced it to the Republic of Korea, 5% of the workforce are going to be North Korean spies. Same in Japan. Fucking, you can never trust the French. So what are you going to do?
I'm out here just trying to share this to as many places as we can right now, because this is something that needs to get more eyes on it, and definitely needs to get more attention.
Well, if you get through to, I don't know, with your new job, if you're able to, call in on Bluetooth to Harrison or whatever, but, if you get through, tell them, hey, Simon's going to try and call you. He's got this crazy fucking story, and, it needs a segment to explain it. We've been lucky that, we're not running ads, and you guys are both real smart and have military. You understand the significance of what I'm explaining, but getting it across to Joe Blow is it's a little bit more complicated. So,
right, yeah.
But anyway, I mean whatever else I think we've kind of
we're on the hour right now.
Beating it to death. But we've
the only thing we didn't get to that we talked about was the Kennedy thing.
Yeah. So Kennedy has put out an 11-minute justification for his position on the vax, and he's giving a speech in Phoenix at 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, where it's
Trump is also in Arizona, right?
He was in Arizona today, where it's widely rumored that Kennedy's going to announce that he's suspending his presidential campaign and he's endorsing Trump in return for Attorney General, head of Health and Human Services, or head of the DHS,
CIA director.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be CIA. I mean,
no, that would be funny. I would like to see RFK at a place like the FDA, because he is kind of like an organic.
Yeah, but that's below him. There's talk about his VP candidate possibly getting head of the FDA.
Yeah, neither of them have really talked about their cabinets. I mean, it seemed like last time we had this go around, they had their dream team. You knew who their cabinets were going to be, and Trump really hasn't said shit about his cabinet.
Well, because he's
probably playing it close to the vest.
He's named his transition team that was supposedly going to be headed by Doug Burgum. He apparently has been kicked to the sidelines, and it's now going to be Vance, Don Jr., and Eric Trump. And what the hell qualifications Don Jr. and Eric Trump have for selecting 14,000 presidential appointees, some of whom have to have ultra secret national security clearances. I do not understand how they're going to do that.
Loyalty.
Loyalty and people he can trust, I guess.
I mean, last time he was hiring people like Pompeo, McMaster, Mattis, some real ludicrous choices, despite getting advice from right-wing.
Well, I guess they can't do any worse than that.
Looks like he's going to appoint Pompeo again. So it's literally going to be Pompeo versus RFK if they're both in the cabinet, right?
Yeah, Pompeo needs to be as far away from any of the levers of power as possible.
I completely agree on that point. But the word is he's shooing for Secretary of State.
No, that's a bad.
I don't understand Trump's obsession with Pompeo. It doesn't.
Who was the other 4-star general that he had? He had Mattis. Who was the other 4-star? Who was his chief of staff?
was
Trump.
that wasn't
McMaster was a
Hmm.
3-star.
was that Flynn?
No, Flynn was a 3-star. Mattis was a 4-star, and there was another 4-star who was his chief of staff at one point.
Oh, McMaster.
No, McMaster was national security advisor.
Oh,
I don't remember. I know I can kind of picture him, but I don't remember
He
who
was
it was.
very, very skinny. And I think they were both
Mhm.
Marines, right? There was Mad Dog Mattis, and then I can't remember the name of the other guy.
it wasn't McRaven or McChrystal,
No.
was it?
No, it wasn't Raven or Crystal.
I don't
It
know.
doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
had
but
a
anyway.
conversation about how many waivers Trump issued in order to put recently retired generals into the civilian administration.
Yeah, terrible idea, by the way.
Yeah.
So, what time is Kennedy giving that speech? You guys going to cover that on your show? Did Kennedy?
2 Eastern, and we're going live at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Now, the other big thing that's happening tomorrow, and I talked about this on Galloway yesterday. I had like a 6-minute segment on with him. I hadn't been on for like 2 or 3 weeks. And the other really big news, which I'm very pleased to tell you, is Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, is giving a speech to basically like the Russian Young Diplomats Association. And it's called, and it's, I asked a Russian speaker, like, is this being reversed in translation? Because it looked like the name should be the meaning of territory, which kind of, from a board game point of view, was understandable, right? Like strategy, okay? But the actual title, as it was translated, and I was told, no, that's correct, it's not been reversed, is The Territory of Meanings. So a bit weird, the title, right? They announced it 2 days in advance, so it's being prepped. There have been extended interviews given on the nature, history, and future individually with the Inter Affairs magazine, RT, and Sputnik on the Commonwealth of Independent States, the Eurasian Economic Union, and the Collective Security Treaty Organization. Okay. Now, Lavrov's been quoted in this announcement that what he's actually going to talk about is the integration of those with BRICS and SCO to form the foundation of the Great Eurasian Partnership. So this is a fucking hugely significant speech. And I'm hoping that the transcript will be available by the time I go live, at least in Russian. And like nobody in the Western media has been talking about that at all. So there was like one sentence about it in a tweet in Russian from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs that linked to their Telegram page that I went to. And at the bottom of the Telegram page, there was a link to like another announcement on like a press release type thing in Russian. I translated that, and I was like, "Fuck me!" And like, so I'd been reading these other 3 extended interviews, and I was wondering, like, why are they talking about this organization like its past and its future? Why are they talking about the Commonwealth of Independent States? Why are they talking about the CSTO? Like all in the same week, literally like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? It was odd. It like really caught my attention. And then when they suddenly announced that he was doing this big thing to weave them all together, I was like, that's it. That's why. So he's going to refer back to the other 3 interviews, just like he did on June the 28th, where he was referring to Putin's speech on the 14th and his earlier announcements on the 21st. And then on the 28th, he was saying, as we told you, as Putin told you, as I told you, we're serious. This isn't a joke. This is what we're doing. And so he's basically going to cross-reference these other previous interviews that have occurred literally this week. So that's a real big deal because we're only 2 months away from the BRICS 2024 summit in Kazan. Countries are lining up like Thailand and Azerbaijan and Turkey and Indonesia and Malaysia to join BRICS along with Algeria. And I forecast that they'd add another 10 countries in. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Maybe they'll give them observer status. But along with Vietnam,
so we've lost the lady boys to the other side, is what you're telling me. That's
well, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that.
I said we've lost the lady boys.
Thailand.
Thailand, right? Okay. So, the interesting thing about Thailand is the Chinese foreign minister was just there, and then the Supreme Court ruled that the winners, not even the winners, but the runners-up of the general election had to be disbanded because they had a policy to repeal the law that made it a felony to insult the monarchy. So they didn't just say you can't go into government, or this guy who proposed this can't be prime minister. They were like, your whole party's gone. Right? But pretty much like it's happening to Kennedy in California and New York and Pennsylvania. And that's part of the reason why he may be induced to give up, because he's facing potentially, as we discussed, I think last week or the week before, some really serious criminal charges for residency fraud, which was blatant. I mean, real blatant. Everyone is saying it's like lawfare like Trump, but no. His fraud was like really blatant. And whilst he's probably overpaid taxes in New York, he's clearly underpaid state income taxes in California. His VP candidate is resident in California, so he can't go, oh, whoops, sorry, I meant to say I was resident in California, because then he wouldn't be able to get any electoral college votes in them under the 12th Amendment of the US Constitution that most people have never heard of. And then he's also got the problem that in many states, he's certified under the penalty of perjury that he's resident in the state of New York, and on the paperwork given an address that turns out to be a bedsit that he was renting, had only stayed in one night in the last 2 years, hadn't paid the rent until there was a court case about it, and had no possessions in the room apart from like a picture of his wife. So clearly, he wasn't a resident of New York. He left.
So I guess hit
10 years ago. 10 years ago.
Everybody needs to hit Weaponized News tomorrow and find out the breakdown on the Kennedy announcement.
Yeah, I've been pretty good on that, to be honest. I covered.
Did we lose him?
Did I lose Simon?
On the George Galloway show. That was like my break.
We lost you for a second, Simon.
Did you? Oh, okay. I was just saying that I've been covering Kennedy in great detail, a lot more detail, I think, than anybody else. And which is not to say that I've covered everything. I've picked and choose which things I wanted to really go into great detail on. But for example, when he announced that he was going independent, when he covered his uncle's Pax Americana speech on the anniversary of that, I spent 2 hours analyzing that speech on TNT radio. When he did his initial announcement of his presidential run, I covered that within minutes live on the George Galloway show. And the groundbreaking thing there in March of 2023 was when he said that American foreign policy was a total disaster. And that's obviously
so you can cover the end of it tomorrow. You'll get the alpha and the omega on the Kennedy
it's going to be full circle. It's going to be from the beginning of the campaign
from Simon and Sam tomorrow
right to the end, right?
But yeah, that was everything we wanted to cover, I think.
Okay, well, guys, thanks ever so much.
Of course.
If I do get killed in my sleep, it's been a pleasure knowing you.
Well, it's out there now, and I shared it to that's all I was doing, was sitting here sharing it to as many places as I could possibly think of.
Well, that's why I sent you the paragraph and the link to the Russian document and the link to the translation and stuff. Yeah.
As far as we're concerned, unfortunately, this is going to be the last Thursday show because I thought that I would be on a 90-day probationary period at my new job, in which place I would move to our second shift. But apparently it's 1 week, and then they're going to move me to the second shift. So
So
next
you see what I
Sunday.
mean about the military industrial complex being short of skilled labor, right?
Yeah, and it's doubly so out where I work because of what they do and how closely they work with the government. They really had to go all in on the COVID stuff, and like half or more of the people that they work with either quit or took early retirement and cashed out. So they've been in the last 3 years they've been trying to refill the ranks. So yeah.
But
Yeah,
you
there's
know
that.
that kind of like, you know, computer assisted design and machining is a genuine skill. I mean, that's a real skill, right?
Right.
And you can't replicate that on like a 2-week training program.
You can't show an Indian how to do it.
Well,
Not usually. Some of them you can, but not usually.
you can show him, but he doesn't have the security clearance, so then you have to kill him afterwards.
Yeah.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
we'll be moving to the same time on Sunday, correct?
Are you guys
For our
going to
next
do
show?
Sundays or Saturdays? Because Saturdays is currently my one day of the week when I don't have a show. So if you want assistance going forward, I can help on Saturdays. That's what you suggested last time, Hobbs, but you changed your mind on that?
I'm thinking like because our Friday shows never really get very much live viewership, and I think that's because most people are out kind of enjoying their weekend, and Saturday's kind of the same way. We've never done a Saturday show. Let's do a Saturday show next week and see how the numbers are, and then go from there. Next Saturday, 9 p.m.
9 p.m. Central Time.
Central Time.
Central.
Yes.
I'm not trying to dictate what you do at all, but
No, it's fine.
It definitely seems, as you might occasionally say, it's worth experimenting, right?
It is worth experimenting, and we always enjoy having you on because you've always got these obscure cuts that you always have before anybody else, and we appreciate your input anytime you're able to come on.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. It's a pleasure cooperating with you. I am now going to sleep with one eye open, and who knows which of us will get picked up on InfoWars. They'll probably just play Harris's speech like 10 times and ignore the fact that we're about to be nuked by the Chinese. So
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us. You know where to find us. Rhodes #2 Liberty on YouTube. I saw we're back on YouTube again. We weren't there last week. We're here now. Rumble, Facebook. You can find us on X at say it, Hobbs.
At R2L Pod on Twitter. I got a good shout out from Harrison the other day.
So we're building a following on X, so go follow us there, and we'll see you next week, Saturday at 9 Central Time. Stay honky.
All right, I got to go to